Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello and welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast. My name is Debbie. I'm your host from NDIS Property Australia. SDA Housing Podcast is a show that explains, highlights, guides and brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing NDIS world. And today we have two very special guest speakers from the SDA Consulting Group, or SDA Consulting Australia, I should say. Welcome, Karina and Nicole.
Karina.
Thank you. Sorry, Karina. I'm reading things too briefly here and not... Yeah, of course it's Karina. We've been chatting a lot recently in the lead up to this. So welcome, ladies. Thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Hello, and thank you for having us.
Great. So I actually interviewed Bruce Bromley, who is your boss, I guess.
My co-director.
Your co-director, sorry, and Nicole, you work for him. And for Karina, recently on another episode. So he suggested that we also have a session with you ladies to find out about the property management side of SDA Consulting, to find out what you do and get a bit of insight into that side of things. So I don't think we've had an SDA property manager or a disability property manager combination provider on the show before. So this is very cool. We'll, I'm sure, learn lots of things that we haven't gone over before. So maybe if I can ask you to, either of you, to, give us an introduction to what a disability accommodation provider actually does.
Okay. Well, otherwise known as the SDA Provider. So what we do is we manage properties on behalf of our owners. And what it means is that we deal with the NDIS portal submissions and, for example, enrolling the property as an SDA. We assist in sourcing participants. We deal with the SIL providers that will be providing the care within the home. So it's basically your property management plus. The owners can't actually claim the payments that participants get allowance for, so the SDA funding. Only an SDA provider can go to the portal to do that. So that's why we will manage homes via way of a head lease that allows us to get into contracts with the participants, with the owners, and with the SIL providers as well. We sign collaboration agreements. So we're the go-to, the central place where all the different parties, sort of relate. But yeah, that's basically it. As far as then managing the property, it's a little bit trickier than the standard property management, and Nicole can sort of jump in at any one time. She's got over 18 years experience with the property management. Once participants sort of are matched to a property, then there's usually modifications and things that have to happen to make sure that the home is right. So it's not just about the category matching the funding, but it's also that the home has the amenities that the participant's going to need to be able to live in that property.
Yeah, sure. So that's actually a really good point. And we might start with that conversation. Is we all know how the different SDA designs work and the different types of people with various disabilities that would be funded to live in each of those different designs. But as you said, there might still be other modifications or other things that are brought into the property that are needed for that individual participant. So, if you can tell us how that works, with the funding, firstly, and just what that might look like.
Yeah, so we basically, once we've shown a participant through and their team, they will come back with a list of modifications that are required for the participant. Locks on kitchen cupboards. This is for robust. TV enclosure, all different bits and pieces. We then arrange the quotes and we will submit them to the owner for consideration. the owner doesn't have to pay for all the modifications. We're finding that a lot of them are paying for the locks, screen doors, but with the carers room, I'm noticing that as well. With a lot of carers are asking for screen doors put on the internal door. That's being funded by the SIL.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And the reason with modifications is if you think about it, the large number of participants and the large number of needs they would have that have to be divided into 4 need categories.
Yeah.
So, of course, it's going to be a big play into participants in that category, the different needs and requirements they're going to have. And that's where the modifications come in to make sure that the home is suitable for their needs.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, we know that if we're talking high physical support, which I guess is where a lot of people have been focused up until now in SDA development from the investor's perspective, and we know that they need to have provision for hoists, automation, those sorts of things. So I guess that would be one of the modifications they're talking about, is if they do require those specific things put in, then that would have to be added. The hoists would have to be installed.
That's right.
So, and from my understanding, it was most of the time that would come out of the participants' funding.
Well, it depends on the modification required. So, but some don't have additional funding to cover the extra bits and pieces. So for owners, we would always go back to the owners and say, look, it's in your interest if you want to be able to secure this participant for your property to be able to accommodate some of the requests that they have.
Okay, yeah. So rather than building it up front with all these extra modifications, future-proofing, there is a lot of things that...
Well, you can't. So sometimes you can't because some of the modifications have got nothing to do with a particular category, but they do need it to be able to get into the home. And in fact, if you put some of these modifications first up, you may not be able to get the home certified.
Sure. Okay. So, yeah, but it's about, I guess, future-proofing after the event to make sure that you are getting participants in there that are going to have their needs and desires and requirements fulfilled and that they'll stay there long-term.
Absolutely. And that is the whole point of the SDA. You want to look after your participant. The participant's the main component of this whole package. So
absolutely. Yeah, totally. So, okay, let's go back to the properties themselves and can we talk about the enrolment process? So I know that that comes after the construction happens, then an SDA assessor has to go in and make sure that it is fully compliant and then it gets enrolled with the NDIA.
Yes, so the assessor will provide certification, which the SDA providers, so ourselves, will then use to go on the NDIS portal and enrol the property. So we'll submit all the information required and NDIS can take normally up to 28 days to be able to confirm that enrolment. If they need any further information or something clarified, they'll come back to the SDA provider and we'll have to do that. Once that's all confirmed, then the property is actually showing live on our provider portal, which then means we'll be able to start doing what we have to do as far as claiming payments and what have you.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, getting the participants in place.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we will start having conversations before the home is enrolled, particularly if we've got people on waiting lists and they've sort of already earmarked a particular property they would like to move into. So we start having the conversations around that, what modifications they need. But then, yeah, obviously they don't move in until the home is actually being enrolled on the property, on the portal.
Yeah. And so usually it takes up to 28 days. Is that sort of...
Give or take, yeah.
For the majority?
As long as all the paperwork's correct, there should be no issues. It's quite streamlined.
Yeah, great. Okay. So I'm sure that our listeners can understand that this is much more than just a regular property management job. So what are some of the challenges and I guess maybe some of the pitfalls that you come across for yourselves as property managers in this space?
I guess the main one would be owners to understand that this is not a standard property where you just advertise it and you're going to get a whole heap of people lining up wanting to move in straight away. We do have to match the participant to the home. And even at times where either the participant or one of their allied health team may like the home, everyone else has to approve the home before they can actually move in. So it's, Nicole, you can jump in at any time here, but yeah, it's not a very simple, it's not a given that the moment you advertise a property, you're going to get it leased.
Yes, 90% of the time, there's so many people involved in one participant going into a home. And the first inspection will usually be somebody checking the home out to make sure it's suitable and looks, it's everything that they need for the participant. Then once the thumbs up is given, then the team come out, whether it be the OT or the behavioural therapist, and they come out to assess the home to make sure that it is going to be okay and what modifications will need doing. And then we go back to the drawing board. And then that's where I need to then organise for a list of all those modifications. We need to organise quotes and submit them to the owner and figure out who's going to pay them. Is the owner going to pay them? Is the SIL going to pay them? Or is the participant going to pay them? And all this is happening before we can even get them the contracts drawn up, because some modifications can be quite expensive.
Yeah. And also making sure the package matches the home that the participant's actually applying for.
Yeah, totally.
That's a big one.
And I'm sure also participant matching for multi-tenant homes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, so basically we will put a participant in the property and they will have their care team. We will continue to advertise the other rooms, but obviously personality profiling and everything will need to be done so that the participant can live in that home. It is very hard to have 2 SILs in a home, so we don't want that. So we do rely heavily on the SIL provider to advertise a home also and bring in participants that will match the current participants in the home.
Match them by way of personality and also by way of supports required, I'd imagine.
Absolutely. It just depends obviously on the category.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So is it common to see 2 participants with 2 totally different support needs in a home, like someone with high physical support, maybe somebody with improved livability?
No. So high fees and fully accessible, they're 2 cohort categories that, they're more compatible to live together. An IL normally would not go into a high fees. Robust is
pretty much standalone, yeah.
Yep. So really the only 2 that are best placed to cohabit would be the FA and the high fees categories.
Okay, so also not an FA and IL.
No, not usual. But it really does depend on the individual and what the particular disability is and particular personality traits. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it could be possible, but exactly what Karina said.
Absolutely.
Because it's such a totally range.
So, and this comes down to, I guess, something I wanted to discuss with you, which is the realities of the income, the funding that is actually going to come, that comes with the participant versus what, I guess, the expectations of property owners. We certainly would suggest to property owners that they're not going to get, if it's a high physical support home, they're not going to necessarily get 2 people with high physical support funding because there's just not necessarily that many out there, and they need to consider a mix. So it's really interesting that you've just said that you wouldn't normally consider an IL with a wheelchair type participant who would be in either an FA or HPS. I'm generalising here, obviously, with the requirements and needs of them, but I would have thought that might have been a more common scenario, but obviously not. So that is really something that needs to be taken into account when we look at the potential income. So how are you seeing it with your investor clients and what's really coming out in the mix with the expectations and what they're actually getting?
I guess what we say to our owners is the calculator, use those numbers as a guide.
Yeah.
Because that is probably going to be the maximum likely you're going to get. Whether you actually get that, that's another story. And it's not always going to happen. In fact, most likely you're not, because it really does also come down to what the home is being enrolled at. So some of the conversations, and Nicole can agree and jump in a little bit in just a moment and explain a little bit further, is SILs that would say to us, don't worry, our participants got a great package. And at the end of the day, it makes no difference to us because we can only claim the portion that's allocated for the SDA, which is the actual bricks and mortar. So with regards to the income that they're likely to get, again, the calculator gives you a best case scenario, and we always put on our head leases, and when we speak to our owners, is that we always confirm it with the participant's plan. We'll come back to them and let them know this is what it could have been achieving, but this is actually the plan that the participant has applied for. This is how much funding they have. With what we were saying before about mixing the IL and the FA, part of the reason that doesn't always work is because we've actually seen that some ILs are actually closer to robust. So we do need to take, when Nicole brought up personality matching, that's one of the things we need to talk about. So it's not just looking at the package IL and FA on paper should get along really well, but it's only when we see the participants that we're realizing this is not going to work very well in the same home. So that's why, mixing within the home comes down really much to the personality of the individual participant.
And also in regards to FA and IL, depending on their needs. So with IL, a lot of the time their SIL funding is also, it's like it may only be, let's say, 3 hours a day. Whereas FA, it may be 24-hour care.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also something that the SILs will also consider.
Yeah. It gets so complicated, doesn't it?
It's so complex. And something else, if you don't mind me touching on the enrollment too, like with the plan. So, this is all hypothetical, but a participant's plan may have 54K in it. And obviously they allow that amount of money because they've allowed them to a robust and, one-on-one, which therefore means that, units or certain properties will achieve that with the enrollment. But then you've got, let's just say hypothetically, 3-bedroom homes, 1 carer, 2 rooms. Now that may be enrolled at, let's say, 40K. This is all hypothetical. And that may be enrolled at 40K. Now, just because the participant's got that 54, as Karina said, the owner won't get that.
Absolutely. The lesser of rule, we call it.
The owner needs to, yes. And then the owner needs to understand that, unfortunately, with the robust, we can't put a second participant in.
Are you seeing any cases of robust participants actually being able to share, or virtually none?
A low amount.
Very, very, very low.
Yeah. We have that understanding too.
The trouble with that too is sometimes we do have participants that apply for property and their funding is for sharing, but we know straight away that that's not going to happen. So the owner will be receiving slightly lesser funding because they haven't been approved on one-on-one. So the ratio is going to be a little bit less, which obviously will be reflected in the funding available to the owner.
Do you see many participants that are coming to you for houses that you got under management actually looking to get their funding increased, going through appeals?
Yes, we have seen our SIL providers that are trying to actually do that. It's not so much for the SDA, but it is, for example, when we're getting a participant that has been provided funding for sharing with, say, 2 others, and the SIL and us realise quite quickly that really they should be living alone or with 1 other participant at most. So then, there is that conversation about getting that package upgraded, but it's not a quick fix.
No, definitely not. We've actually just very recently been lucky enough to have join us as a staff member, Brendan Wolfe, who is a participant up here in Brisbane, and he spent 916 days appealing his funding to get the actual funding that he wanted. Yeah, went to the appeal, then it had to go to the AAT. I mean, that is nearly 3 years of fighting to stay in the home that he was already living in. He won eventually, just quite recently, which is a fantastic result, but it should never have taken that long. And
it's exhausting.
Yeah, absolutely. And he says, look, if I'd sort of known what it was going to take, I may not have gone down that path. But, fortunately he did, and he's got the funding that he deserves and needs. But so for people that don't have the level of funding that they probably should have and need, it's not necessarily something they're going to even want to do, is to fight for that. So they may end up in a property that suits them, but they don't have the funding that the owner is going to be expecting to get when they're looking at these high levels coming in.
Yeah.
When they look at the calculator.
Yeah, that's right. And the other issue too, and luckily we've not seen this often, but we know is happening, where a participant gets funded for example, no share, but then as they settle into the home and behaviours drop and what have you, they're managed better, the funding could change and it could actually be lowered. So then there's that process to get the funding back up to what it was. Otherwise, we have to get someone else in the home, which we know will trigger all the initial behaviours that we're able to manage by them not having to share.
Yeah.
So it's not another thing, I guess, we'd say to our owners is just because they move in all the paperwork's done and it's worked beautifully, it does not mean that that's it from now on. There will not be any changes or,
So when you say that they've had a drop in funding, are you talking about like SIL funding or SDA?
Or even SDA. Where,
Really? I thought that they couldn't actually drop someone's SDA funding once they had it in their plan.
well, it hasn't happened to us, but we have heard that.
You have heard it. Wow. Okay. I mean, obviously we know that with the latest price review, the unit high physical support funding levels did go down, which I think has surprised a lot of people. But I was under the impression that generally the funding level someone has, they can't be reduced to a higher support ratio or whatever. Yeah. Okay, so that's a concern. That's definitely a concern for property owners, for yourselves as SDA providers.
Yeah, that's right. And for the participants too, because they want to move into their forever home. They don't want to have to keep fighting to now stay in their forever home.
Definitely not. And, I'd imagine that listeners can relate to moving home for anyone is a really stressful event, and you don't want to have to do that as a participant. So that's why it's so important to try and get them the right level of funding and into the right property to start with. And so there's just so many complexities, revolving getting the participants in the home. We speak to investors all the time or people that are looking to invest all the time. And so often they just think, okay, build the house and we'll get 2 people or 3 people moving in. Yep. Easy, done. And we spend most of our time explaining.
And it's guaranteed income, apparently.
No, it's what you've got to understand is how much hard work it is to get the right tenants in place, the right participants with the right funding and the matching funding. So I guess that's the complexities, I guess, for yourselves as the managers and for the property owners. But with the participants themselves, obviously the funding, I wouldn't say instability, but even if it's a very rare potential of their funding level being changed, what other challenges are you seeing that participants themselves are facing in moving into SDA? Apart from obviously availability of the correct one.
Availability, yeah. But the allied team, I guess, Nicole, you can explain this a little bit more because she's more on the ground, so she sees it a lot more, where the SIL providers and the allied health team, they're not really talking well, they're not communicating well within one another, the plan managers. So the participants got people in their team that are not necessarily all going for the same outcome, or different people in the team not understanding exactly what's required to be able to get the participant in their home.
Yeah. There's obviously, once again, it's very complex. There's so many hands in the pie. So trying to basically navigate that as a property manager can also be very challenging because I'm dealing with so many different people to try and get the participant into this home settled and have everything done for the participant that they need and want.
And they've got their ways of doing it and their way that they see it be done. And then there's other members in that team that think something else should be done or should be done differently. And sometimes, quite often, we're sort of stuck in the middle trying to manage all the different opinions. But at the end of the day, our goal is to get the participant in the home, get them settled in and get the modifications that they need, and getting the owners some sort of the level of income that they were expecting for that property. That's, I guess, our goal.
Yeah. So I guess this touches on the whole subject of separation of supports and housing, which I know you guys are only SDA providers. We do know there's a lot of organisations out there that do both the SIL and the SDA, and we've discussed this before. But what's your take on the separation of those supports, how important it is?
Very important, absolutely. It's all about choice for the participant. If they're not happy with the SIL, they should not have to move out of their home, and vice versa.
Yeah. So are you seeing that is becoming more common, the separation, or you still see that maybe it's still happening too often in the industry?
Oh, there's still quite a lot of it happening in the industry, yeah. But we're very lucky with our SILs and with the participants. They know if there's an issue about their home, they know they can come to us. If there's an issue about their care, they go straight to the SIL. It's very simple and clean, and that's the way we like it. But there's definitely quite a lot of SIL providers providing SDA still in the industry.
Yeah, yeah.
And it truly, if I can, it is truly a beautiful feeling seeing the participants, how happy they are once they're in their SDA and they've made it theirs, they've put their little footprint on it. It's actually really lovely to see how happy and it's life-changing for them.
Yeah, to tell us more about that, Nicole, because we don't, I guess, often hear from that side of things is just the overall, that's what we're all doing this for in the end, is to find people a forever home that is going to change their lives.
Yeah. Just hearing, I even going there to do, inspections to make sure that all the modifications and the maintenance is all being completed and everything's okay. And just seeing how that they've set up home, and it's their home. Like it's not the SILs' home, it's theirs. And it's, I've had feedback that behaviours,
big smiles on their faces, even on the non-verbal participants. Yeah, definitely get that feedback directly from them.
Yeah, so happy when and you can just see. Yeah, it's really amazing to see.
That's what it's all about, and I guess too the fact that it does reduce behaviours in some cases, and so it's giving them a better quality of life. It's also improving their condition, which is going to be reducing support costs.
It's giving them independence. In a lot of cases, they feel
so much.
They're able to do things for themselves in that home.
And even when I contact the supports or family, whoever, a month after, just to make sure that everyone's going, how's the participant going? Are they happy? And just to read in the email, absolutely amazing. And that's always, it's really heartfelt, to be honest.
That is wonderful. And look, that is what this is all about. So many investors really only are looking at this from a financial perspective. And I would really reiterate to our listeners out there that that's not what it's all about. And yes, that is a fantastic benefit and that's the whole reason that the NDIA decided to incentivize private investment into this with the SDA funding. But you've really got to look at it from a bigger picture perspective. And at the end of the day, what you're doing is giving somebody a home and giving them a chance to live a much better, more independent, fulfilled life. And they're going to be happier. Their family is going to be happier. The whole community is going to benefit from this. So it's really interesting to hear your take from, being right in the middle of it, between the investors and the property owners and the participants and the support workers. So I haven't got any other questions really. Have you got any last thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
I guess what we started with, the education of the owners, people that are looking to get into NDIS homes, just to understand that the reason for it is to be able to provide housing that is going to be suitable for people with disability. The fact that it's going to be a better investment than possibly a standard home, that's a bonus. But don't get in just on the numbers, because if the numbers don't work exactly as the calculator says, and you're going to find that that's going to be an issue for you, then don't get into it.
Absolutely. Sorry, I said I had no more questions, but I did want to just touch on who can work with you. So do you take on property owners all over Australia? Do you just work in certain areas?
Yep, we manage Australia-wide, and we have our line of inquiry come directly sometimes from participants themselves or their carers or guardians. Then we have a lot of SIL providers that come to us saying we've got participants that we need to find a home to be able to provide care in. We've got sometimes NDIS contacts us directly, or other big advocate groups. But so line of inquiry comes from everywhere, and we manage Australia-wide.
Fantastic. So if we had anyone listening to this that wanted to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
Probably email, I guess. I'll put my email address, Karina, Karina, at equalaccessgroup.com.au. Or even to our website, SDA-consulting.com.au. There's a contact us page. Those emails come to me anyway, and we'll be able to assist you.
Fantastic. And we'll have those details on the information at the bottom of this episode. So, it's been great to speak to both Nicole and Karina and just get a bit of an insight into the hard work that SDA providers actually do and the challenges that you have. So I think a lot of our investors will be this should be a really absolute must listen to episode to understand why it's such a complex area in actually tenanting your property. So thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having us.
And look forward to maybe speaking to you down the track when you've got more to tell us about more of your properties under management and where the industry's going.
Wonderful. Thank you again.
Thank you. Okay, and we look forward to seeing you all on the next episode.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.